We can think of drawing as a language. In this course, we'll use that language to describe what we see. However, the goal is not to copy what we see. That would be impossible since we don't see the world in images that can be copied. Instead, we can think of drawing as describing our experience of seeing using marks on a page, the way a writer would describe an experience using words. Like the writer, we can decide what aspects of our experience to include and what to leave out. The vocabulary of drawing consists of the visual elements. These are rough categories of the marks or lack of marks that an artist can make on the page. The visual elements are line, shape, value, proportion, and color. A line can be a visible mark or visual path that guides the eye. A line can be created by the path the tool takes across the page, the edge between shapes, or implied by the alignment of elements, such as a dotted line. The value of line can help describe light and dark, and line can create shape by enclosing space. A shape is a two-dimensional area, unified by value, color, or an outline. A shape can be geometric, like a square or a triangle, or organic, with irregular curves and edges. Line and shape are closely connected. Shapes can create lines at their edges, while lines can create shapes by enclosing space within an outline. In common language, shape is often used to refer to three-dimensional form, such as describing a book as box-shaped. However, in art terms, shape refers specifically to the two-dimensional element, while form describes three-dimensional volume. Value describes the light and dark within an image, from the deepest black a medium can produce to the brightest highlight. Every mark falls somewhere within this range, brighter than some and darker than others. Value can describe the brightness and darkness we see, with lighter values representing illuminated surfaces and darker values representing shadow. Value is present in every line, shape, and color, with differences in value being necessary for an element to be visible at all. Proportion describes the relative sizes and distances within an image. For example, the height of a rectangle compared to its width defines its proportions. Every mark within an image creates proportions automatically because it has its own dimensions and its own spatial relationships to the borders of the frame and every other element within it. Color is our perception of the wavelengths of light reflected off of surfaces. Unlike the other elements, you can create an image entirely without using color, while it's impossible to draw without creating lines, shapes, values, and proportions. For this reason, we won't cover color in this course. Understanding a bit about how our visual experience works can help us to better describe it in a drawing. It may seem as though our eyes are skull-mounted cameras that give us a live video feed. However, our visual experience is actually a three-dimensional mental model of our surroundings, constructed by our visual system, based on the light that reaches our eyes. This mental model includes the objects and surfaces around us, and their relative positions in space from our point of view. We recognize the objects in this mental model by their forms and the relative positions of their forms. This is why we can immediately recognize an object despite it appearing differently when viewed from a different angle. Because we see through light reaching our eyes, the brightness and darkness of a surface also reveals its form and position in space. When we draw from life, we're describing that visual experience using the visual elements of our drawing. If we can accurately translate our subject's forms, surfaces, and the position of those forms in space into lines, shapes, values, proportions, and colors, then the drawing will look like the subject. In other words, it'll capture the experience of seeing it in a way that's clear to the viewer. For example, in this drawing, I use lines to show the edges of surfaces. I use value to describe the light wrapping around the forms. And I use proportion to represent the relative sizes and positions of the object's parts. When drawing from life, we describe our experience of seeing using the elements of an image, such as using value to describe light, or line to describe form. However, drawing from photographs is different. Instead of translating what we see, we're simply copying an image from one medium into another. We represent the visual elements of the photograph with the visual elements of our drawing. When drawing from life, we need to decide which aspects of our experience to describe and how to represent them. When drawing from a photograph, we can skip this step. You can simply copy the lines, shapes, values, proportions, and colors of the photograph without considering the forms, positions, and light that created them. The drawing on the left is drawn from the photograph, while the drawing on the right is the same subject but drawn from life. In the drawing on the left, I could copy the lines I saw in the photo. While in the drawing on the right, there are no lines for me to copy, so I had to observe the forms and translate those into lines. I had to choose how I would use my lines to describe the forms, instead of copying the lines that I saw in a photo. There's also much more information available for me to interpret when drawing from life than what I can see in the photograph. This doesn't mean you should never work from photographs. It's possible to reinterpret a photo in the same way we would when working from life. but that's much harder if you don't have the experience drawing directly from observation. There's a trap that artists can fall into by learning to draw only from photographs. They may become very skilled at copying from a photograph into a drawing and develop good control of their medium. Their drawings might even be impressive, but they haven't learned how to translate what they see or imagine into a drawing. Without the ability to translate the three-dimensional forms, positions, and light that they see, they'll be unable to draw without having their subject already translated for them by a photograph. Their skills won't transfer over to drawing from life or imagination. This course doesn't cover drawing from imagination. For that, check out my book, Imaginative Drawing, that you can download for free at imaginativedrawing.com. However, the skills you learn from drawing from life translate directly to drawing from imagination. When drawing from imagination, we translate our ideas into visual elements. If we can express our ideas in terms of forms, the position of those forms, and the light that hits those forms, we can describe them with the same techniques we use when drawing from life. For example, to draw this dinosaur, I can express the ideas that make up the dinosaur in terms of forms and the position of those forms. The dinosaur has a skull that gives its head its overall forms. The eye is made up of forms as well, such as the eyeball and the eyelid. These forms have specific sizes and positions relative to each other that make them recognizable. I can translate these ideas into my drawing by using lines and shapes to describe the forms, and proportion to represent their sizes and positions. If I want to render my drawing, I can use color and value to describe how light would fall across these forms. There's more to describing ideas in terms of forms, positions, and light than I explained here, but the skills developed in this course are an important part of the process. For this lesson, we'll do an exercise called blind contour. The goal is to practice making careful observations of your object and translating them into drawing, because seeing itself is a skill that can be improved through practice. In this exercise, we'll focus on observing contours, which are the surfaces of your object that you can see and touch. Start by focusing your eye on a single point on the edge of the subject. Then follow that edge with your eye, slowly moving that point of focus down the surface. The red line represents the path my eye is taking across the subject. As your eye follows that edge, move your pen across your page in the same path that your eye is taking. Try to make it feel like you're touching the edge of that surface with the tip of your pen, the same way you could imagine what it would feel like to touch that edge if you ran your finger across it. As you draw, keep your eyes focused on the edge of your subject. Don't look at your page while you're drawing. It's important to make slow, careful observations here, since part of the point of this exercise is to practice really seeing your subject. Now that I've shown how to make slow, careful observations, I'll speed this demo up to 4 times speed, just so it doesn't take too long. In this demo, I'm using a photograph so I can show you what I'm looking at and demonstrate my thought process, but it's intended to be done from life with a real object. Your final drawing is going to end up looking pretty wonky. That's to be expected. You're not looking at your page when you draw, so obviously it's going to look kind of weird. The point's not to make a good-looking drawing, it's to practice making careful observations, focusing those observations on contours and how it would feel to touch the surface. For your 90-minute study sessions, spend the first 30 minutes doing the blind contour exercise. Spend the next 50 to 55 minutes drawing your object to the best of your ability. If you finish your drawing before the time is up, draw your object again with the remaining time. If you don't finish your drawing before the time is up, you can pick up where you left off in the next study session, or take extra time if you'd like. After you're done drawing, spend 5 to 10 minutes writing and reflecting on how it went. What went well, and what could you do better next time? If you'd like extra accountability, you can post your study plan in the accountability channel of the course Discord. If you'd like feedback, post the results of your exercises in the exercises channel. And post your drawing and a photo of your object in the course critique channel. If you have any questions, you can ask those in the course help channel. I can't wait to see your work, and happy drawing!